So I wanted to make a second video about installing the DTube truss rod in a guitar neck from dragonplates.com. It occurred to me after making the last one that when I installed the DTube in the slot and I used clamps to apply pressure here and hold it into place, that might not be a good thing because epoxy is not like wood glue. It's not meant to be pressed tightly together and have it go into the parts. That's certainly not going to happen to carbon fiber. And I started to worry that maybe by applying pressure to the joint with epoxy, that it would actually be squeezing the epoxy out and maybe not getting the best bond. So I came up with a different technique to do that, and I'm going to show what that is here today. And this is the same as before, where I had the CNC machine cut out a trough that is perfectly sized. It's like 5/1000 of an inch oversized, and room for the saddle, which fell down on the floor here. So anyway, room for the saddle to fit in this area here. Goes down in that hole, and he goes down there quite a ways, as you can see. So I'm gonna put the epoxy in here and show you how I'm going to do it this time to keep it, make sure that it stays down in the slot while the epoxy is drying, but not risk squeezing out too much of it. So what I've done this time is I have my neck prep jig, which is the jig I use on the CNC machine for performing this operation here. This is what holds it in place, locks it down tight, and registers on the CNC waste table, so that I can do this machining for the headstock surface, and then the trough, and then also the locator holes for the other side jig that will cut the back of the neck. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this jig just because it holds the neck nice and level for me and allows me to lock it down. I can put these clamps on here and hold it in place, keep it from moving. And then what I've done is I put it on my go bar deck. Now this is, sorry, I got a lot of clutter around here, but this is my go bar deck, which is really just a bunch of pipe clamps with pony clamp parts, just the movable part that clamps on it and keeps it from moving when you apply pressure with the regular part. In fact, here's one in place on a regular pipe clamp, and it's simply this part here. And what this does is it allows me to move this deck up and down to whatever height I need. And so what I've done is I positioned it carefully so that a go bar, when put on that surface right there, has just a little bit of tension in it. All right, just a little bit of tension, so it's applying a downward force, but not so much that it's really gonna push too hard on it. And so I'm gonna use that to clamp down on top of the DTube. And this is also how I put braces on the guitars, and also how I attach the top and the backs of the guitars, because it allows me to put clamping pressure anywhere I need it within that deck. And so the idea here is that when I clamp down these clamps on the neck surface, it will force that wood. If it's not perfectly straight and flat already, clamping it down to the deck here, because it's a CNC'd surface, will force it to a flat surface and hold the neck in position while the truss rod is bonded to it. And that way, I'm forcing the neck to the truss rod stiffness and making sure it's flat as it gets bonded in there. And I don't have to worry about it being warped maybe slightly, even though the truss rod is being glued in there. So that's the goal here, and I'll show that being done. Okay, so here's the neck clamped into the holding fixture, and it's all clamped down. It's got 6 points on it that clamp down and hold it straight. And you can see I've got a straight edge on it, and sure enough, it's nice and straight. Don't have to worry about any warpage. So now we'll just bond the DTube to it in this position, and that should keep it nice and straight. And once again, before actually putting it in there, I'm using earplugs to fill the void inside the DTube. So I quartered an earplug with an X-Acto knife and just kind of shoved it in the hole there and let it expand, and cut it off, and that'll keep the epoxy out of it. Okay, so here's the epoxy in place in the trough. You can always see it. I've already got the saddle inserted. I put epoxy in the hole there and inserted it in there. You can see where it's kind of floating up on me. Do the hydraulic action inside of that hole. That's good. That means we got good contact down there, and that's why I'm concerned about putting clamping pressure on this while I put it in place. So I just spread a nice, pretty generous layer of epoxy wax. I expect a lot of that to kind of come out as it gets pressed in there. And so I'm gonna put the DTube in now. Hopefully I can do this with one hand on the camera. You can see that I machined the DTube a little tighter in the corners this time with a smaller bit, so that I didn't have to trim as much off of it. There we go. And so now it's going down. Now I'm going to put pressure on it with the go bar deck to make sure that it's below the surface of the fretboard gluing surface, because I don't want to have to mess with sanding that carbon fiber. But that's it in place over the top of the saddle, and everything's nice and straight, so that should do it. Here it is with the truss rods in place. You can see just a little bit of flex in them, which is applying that downward pressure, and you can certainly see that there's been a little bit of epoxy squeeze out, sitting a little bit shy of the top of the neck plane. Over here, it's just I put a couple extra on them, and I actually added some spacers to apply more pressure right there because it wasn't quite sitting down below where I wanted it to do. It's looking pretty good now. I can still hang a fingernail on it just a little bit. It's pretty small though, so if I do have to sand it, it won't be a whole lot. So this looks pretty good. We'll wait for this to dry, and then it'll be time to CNC carve the back of that neck.